Have you ever hit the back half of your workday and realized that you weren't as sharp in the afternoon as you were in the morning? Were you more impatient than you expected? Small problems suddenly seemed much larger, and the creative solution that normally would come easily just wasn't there. And if you're honest, maybe you've begun to wonder if it maybe just isn't the afternoons anymore. Do you question whether or not the afternoon is just that you're not as sharp as you used to be, period? That fading edge has a name. It's called mental stamina, and is one of the hidden reasons why good leaders stop short at becoming great. Here's something that most people never hear. Your brain is only about 2% of your entire body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of all the oxygen your body uses. That's 1/50th of your body weight, demanding 1/5 of your body's oxygen. That's why mental stamina is not primarily a psychological problem first. It's a physiology problem first. And the single best measure of that physiology is a number called VO₂ max. In this video, I'm going to show you the biology behind that mental reserve, why it drains over the course of a day, and the simplest way to start rebuilding it. Now, if you appreciate me making this kind of content, please let me know by gently tapping the like button below. Okay, let's go. So let's start with what mental stamina actually is, because most people haven't ever thought about it as a real physical thing. Now think about this. You weren't a different person in the afternoon than you were in the morning. You still cared. You still had the same experience, the same knowledge and the same values you had at 9 a.m. But compared to the morning, somehow in the afternoon, you weren't at your best. And it seems that the usual explanations really don't fit, because some people assume that this just happens with age. Others state that this is what happens when you have too much stress. And still other people might say that you're just burning out. But what if one of the hidden reasons isn't psychological at all? What if your brain simply doesn't have the reserve that it once had? When you get to later in the day, or later in the week, or later in your career. Years ago, I spoke with a successful executive who described exactly this. He told me that by late afternoon, he wasn't making the same quality decisions that he had made in the morning. And he wasn't any less intelligent. He wasn't less committed. He just felt mentally repressed, mentally restricted. He found himself reacting to circumstances rather than thinking them through first. He saw himself becoming impatient rather than staying strategic. And he assumed that this was just one of the costs of leadership, to have this kind of afternoon brownout, where he didn't have all the same resources that he had in the early parts of the day. But I don't think it was. I think that it was the cost of reduced physiologic reserve. And that brings us to the first amazing fact I'd like to share with you. It's the same one that I opened with at the beginning, because that is worth sitting with for just a second. Your brain represents only about 2% of your entire body weight, yet it consumes approximately 20% of all the oxygen your body uses. It's using 10 times its share of oxygen. No other organ in the body places that kind of demand on the body's oxygen delivery systems. Now think about it. Every difficult conversation, every strategic decision, every creative solution, every moment of emotional self-control depends on that one small organ getting a sufficient delivery of continuous oxygen supply. So that raises an obvious question. How well is your body able to deliver that oxygen? And that's exactly what the VO₂ max helps to measure. The VO₂ max is your body's maximum ability to take in oxygen, transport it through the heart and blood vessels, and deliver it to working tissue, including your brain. Now, most people think that the VO₂ max measurement is only an athletic number, a measurement for runners or cyclists. It isn't. It's a measurement of your body's aerobic capacity, and that capacity affects more than just how fast you can run. It affects the organs that you can lead with. Now, if you're beginning to find this useful so far, go ahead and hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people to reach this kind of content. And here's the second amazing fact. Researchers haven't put a room full of leaders on treadmills to figure out who becomes the better leader, but they have measured something remarkably close. They've measured the specific mental abilities that separate exceptional leaders from average ones. And psychologists have a name for these mental abilities. They call them executive function. Executive function includes things like planning ahead, working memory, sustained attention, mental flexibility, resisting impulsive reactions, solving complex problems, and making thoughtful decisions under pressure. These are the things that comprise executive function and are the specific mental abilities that have been measured by psychologists. Now, think about the things that a great leader does during their day. A great leader plans, prioritizes, solves problems, controls emotions under tense circumstances. They adapt when circumstances change, have mental flexibility. They stay calm under pressure. They keep multiple priorities organized. And they make wise decisions when the stakes are high. And all of this leads to a statement that I want you to hear and remember. Leadership is executive function expressed through relationships. Now that's a big idea, and let me explain why it matters. Leadership isn't merely charisma. It's not simply being confident. Leadership is the consistent ability to use executive function to influence people wisely. And here's what makes this exciting. Multiple studies have shown that people with higher cardiorespiratory capacity consistently perform better on many of the measures of executive function. Now, I want to be careful and honest here, because this could be where a lot of content would overpromise. Scientists are not saying that aerobic fitness automatically makes somebody a great leader. Character matters, wisdom matters, experience, integrity, emotional maturity, they all matter. But science does tell us something important. The biologic machinery that supports clear thinking simply works better when your body's aerobic capacity is greater. The very mental abilities that great leadership requires are supported by the very same physiologic systems that are measured by the VO₂ max. One of the landmark studies in this field was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Researchers found that older adults who in a year-long aerobic exercise program actually increased the size of the hippocampus, which is a brain region essential for learning and memory. And it improved their memory performance at the same time. Sit with that for just a moment. Aerobic training produced a measurable structural change in the brain, in the adult brain, in the mature brain, an older brain, not a young brain. Now that fact alone does not prove that exercise alone creates better leaders, but it does demonstrate something genuinely hopeful. Your brain is not fixed in its size or its capacities. It responds to how we live. And if you feed it correctly, it can grow. Now, quick break, because this connects back to something very practical. Everything that I'm describing comes back to the one number that most people have never had measured. That's why I put together a video that breaks down what VO₂ max can do for you and why it may be one of the most important health numbers that you've never heard of. And you can find that video linked in the description below. And if you're ready to stop guessing and actually know your number, you might consider having a professional VO₂ max assessment done. Because once you can measure your capacity, you gain the ability to improve it. Okay, let's get back to this. Because there's a bigger picture here than most leadership books actually miss. You see, most leadership books focus on psychology. Others emphasize communication. Some teach negotiating. Others focus on strategy. And all of that matters in both business and leadership. But very few discuss physiology. And yet, every leadership decision is made by a living brain. Every creative insight, every difficult conversation, every moment of patience, every strategic plan, every act of emotional intelligence, all of this depends on billions of brain cells producing energy, and those cells need oxygen every second of the day. Your body delivers that oxygen through an integrated system. Your lung, your heart, your blood vessels, your blood and your muscles all working together in a system. And one of the best overall measures of how well that entire system functions is VO₂ max. That's why it's become one of the strongest single indicators of overall physiologic capacity that we have. And so here's the idea that I want to leave you with. Your leadership is limited by whatever system fails first. Your character, your knowledge and experience, or your physiology. Now, we may spend years gaining knowledge and experience, and many of us spend a lifetime developing in character. Yet we often neglect the physiology that supports both. And the good news, the genuinely encouraging part, is that aerobic fitness is trainable. You can improve it. Now, you don't need to become a marathon runner to do that. In fact, the greatest gains happen right at the very beginning of any kind of improvement, when you go from low fitness to moderate. That's where the greatest benefit is actually in the literature. Even brisk walking or bicycling or swimming done consistently can improve your cardiorespiratory fitness over time. And one simple place to start is a brisk 20 to 30 minute walk most days of the week. And if you need an easy way to gauge the effort of your walk to know if you're doing enough, walk fast enough that a conversation is still possible, or you can walk so fast that you can keep a conversation going but you can't finish an entire sentence, but also fast enough that singing would be difficult. That's the zone. And this is not about exhausting yourself. It's about gradually increasing your body's capacity, because it's your capacity that changes everything. The quality of your leadership can never consistently exceed the quality of your thinking. And the quality of your thinking depends, in part, on the health of the organ doing the thinking. And by the way, I'd love to know where you're starting from when you do this. Drop a comment below to tell me one thing you already do to stay sharp during a long day, because I read those comments, and the best ones very well may turn into future videos in this series. So let me bring this all the way back around. Most people think that the VO2 max is for athletes. It isn't. It's for parents, pastors, physicians, teachers, business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, and anyone whose work depends on making good decisions. The VO2 max is not a measure about how athletic you are. It's about how much physiologic reserve you bring to the table, to every decision you make. The better your reserve, the better your stamina later in the day. Leadership is moral. Leadership is intellectual. Leadership is relational. But leadership is also biological. Every decision you make is made by a living brain that runs on oxygen. And the greater your physiologic reserve, the greater reserve you bring to every person you lead with all the executive capacity you can bring. And that's how good leaders become great. Not by adding just one more strategy, but by strengthening the biological foundation under all of them that allows them to demonstrate what they have, even late in the day when everybody else is exhausted, because your stamina persists. If you want to go deeper on that number itself, continue to watch for these videos in this series as I explain what VO2 max really is, how to measure it, and what it can mean to you. If you subscribe to this channel, as I make more of these videos, you'll be notified so you won't miss. And you can also look in the description below for the more comprehensive video on executive capacity and VO2 max. I'll see you in the next one.